Hi to those who join us for the first time. This is the third chapter of the webinar, Reinvent Yourself, Prepare for a New Future Ahead. I am Raquel Ribeiro, and this closing session is about connecting cultural challenges and legal matters. It's true, all good things come to an end, but don't worry, we'll keep in touch and stay connected. And don't go immediately after, as we hope to see you in the questions and answers that will follow our speakers' interventions. And today, with us again, ladies and gentlemen, Cristina da Costa and John Parkerson, to talk about connecting people, connecting cultures, and international contexts. And I have a first question for Cristina. Cristina, many businesses and individuals will perceive a need to re-examine their global expansion and career plans. You have both experienced career changes and international challenges. What lessons can you highlight from that? Word is yours.
So, what can I share? We are living challenging times, there's no doubt, but again, there is opportunities to rethink a career, to pivot a business, and I've been talking to some of my clients and in situations that they are doing that, and it's amazing how the capacity to really step back and rearrange everything. It's really interesting and wonderful to see. It's an opportunity to reset, actually. In my personal experience, when I moved from Europe to the US, I changed careers, a country, a culture, everything, all at the same time. It was quite of a shock. My value, my experience, my knowledge was not immediately recognized by the US market. It was a process, still continues a process. And that was, saying, how can I build a consulting and a coaching practice from scratch that is successful in a new country? And especially here in the US where, it's such a dynamic and competitive market. So, I looked for answers, and I interviewed foreign companies here in the U.S. and I learned a lot. I met amazing people. I got so many insights that I was able to condense them in 4 specific principles, and I have a book that I wrote about that is Come Prepared. Everywhere you go. And it's 4 key principles that international businesses should follow to succeed in the US market. And these principles, when I look at all that we are living, they're very relevant today for any expansion career or expanding the business or shifting the business, going to another country, looking for a change. And the first key principle that I would recommend really is to have a purpose and a clear why. Why do you want to do that career shift? Why do you want to go to another country? Why do you want to shift your business? Why do you want to go to do the business somewhere else? Because that specific why will be very deep why will be what will help you in those challenges that come our way in anything that we do that is different and new. So it's very good to have that clear purpose. Have financial support, second principle, and other resources. You will need to do networking. You will need to connect to people. You need to move around, and you need to do marketing to put your name out there, put your business out there. You need to invest in all these trade shows and so to gain visibility and credibility. The third principle is have a plan, have a medium-term plan and a long-term plan. But this plan, you have to be monitoring it so that you adjust as you go. Coming without a plan or going anywhere with no plan is and very little resources and clarity is not a good step. The fourth principle is to prepare to grow, because the opportunity will show, and you need to have systems in place, a process, something that makes you be able to work well and respond to the needs of the market.
Okay, maybe before I move on to John, I have some more questions for you, Christina, and you can decide if you want to respond at the same time or if you want me to separate questions. But given the moments we are living now, how can we help people to deal better with each other, especially in an intercultural context? You have a
Oh,
lot to
that's
say about that from your own experience, so it would be
yeah,
great to hear
yeah.
from you on that.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, that is a great question. And in my book, I give many practical examples of the business cultural differences, especially if you're coming to the US. And it is important. It is important to really pay attention because in these and also in these uncertain times, you may be starting to talk to other people in other countries to follow this idea of yours or this new project that you have. And you need to be aware that people right now are struggling, you know, with in so many different ways. And it's very important that you pay attention to how you are perceiving all that, because you will get different reactions from people from all over the world. And if you're doing a business expansion plan or a career shift or any of that, be self-aware. What Remember that your beliefs, your values, your personal biases that come from your influence from your education, from the customs in your country, from your life, your family, from your own experience as a person, and all that comes together and really makes shifts or shapes a better way, shapes the way you experience the world. And so be aware of that. Okay, self-awareness. The other thing is research. If you know you're going to start talking to people in a specific in the Netherlands or anywhere, you know, do some research. What is it? You can find so many books and so many online information about that. Meet people from other countries. You know, travel if you can, to get aware and get more comfortable with the differences. Be flexible and acceptant of people, and really don't stereotype. Everyone is unique. I think that helps the intercultural context.
And how about technology? What is the role of technology in getting people closer and working on the trust issue?
Yeah, so that is a really good topic, trust. Um, you know, we've been, in these last 2 months, we've been forced. Humans have been forced to this connectivity through technology, and that has changed our mindsets. You know, in the past, you would not think of going to an important meeting, of being an important meeting with your CEO, an international CEO, or on a Zoom call. No, you would have to travel across the world to be in a meeting that would last like a day, maybe, you know, because it was an important meeting. So what you see now is the world is more open to really trusting technology or someone being on a Zoom call to attend an important meeting, to close an important deal. You know, I have a client that right before the coronavirus situation in Europe, he traveled to Canada for a meeting with a potential customer of his because it was important for him to do that, and he had, you know, struggle and he got sick. So, you know, now I'm sure that it's possible for him and so many to do these meetings with new customers or potential customers, even on technology. People are, you know, more comfortable with that. And so I work with clients in Europe, in Latin America, in the US, even in Australia. And it's possible for the work I do, coaching people, coaching managers and leaders, it's possible to create that trust. I mean, for this kind of work, it's paramount. And how do you do that? You know, trust is a feeling. It's not an instruction. You can't say, trust me. I'm your coach now, trust me. Or I'm your manager, trust me. You know, it doesn't work, because trust is an emotional but also a logical act, and people need to feel safe and to feel vulnerable and know that they're not going to be taken advantage of. So consistency is very important. When I work with my clients, I explain the rules first. So this is how we are going to work, and this is my commitment to you. And then I'm consistent with that, because otherwise there is no chance that they can really shift and change their behavior on what needs for their benefit and the people they work with. So it's important to, open up, expose yourself a little bit to your teams, and to show a little vulnerability is okay, because people kind of trust that, but you need to be authentic. And the other thing is, people are, when you're a leader or manager, it's showtime all the time. Like I say to my clients, it's showtime all the time. People are looking at you, everything you do, especially if you're under stress. If you're authentic, you're going to behave the same way. You're consistent. So it's very important to see who you are and work on your values to be with other people and building that trust, even online.
Thank you, Christina. And now, John, do you have anything to add to what Christina just said?
Just a very brief point, because Christina covered the subject so thoroughly. I think about cultivation of my clients over a period of time. During normal times, we spend a lot of time developing our networks, and we have to maintain that constant development of networks and cultivation of those with whom we may be working in the future. They need to know that you're out there, you're competent, and over time, using these tools, technology tools, we can maintain those relationships that we spent so much time cultivating.
Okay, John, and now considering your areas of expertise, I'd like to hear you about human resources and the challenges that we are facing right now about hiring, managing, outsourcing, remote work. These are some of the major concerns for companies, leaders and teams more than ever. From a legal viewpoint, which best practices would you recommend?
Yeah, when companies are considering expansion into new countries overseas, we say in the United States, then HR is one of the most significant factors to consider. I mean, there are other things. There's a whole menu of things to be considered, but HR, hiring, how do you staff that entity? How do you manage it? What's your best model? Is it should I outsource some of those functions? Should I allow my employees to work remotely, or should they have to come into the office periodically? These are all major concerns that companies should face. So from the legal standpoint, I can tell you that HR is very difficult, and we receive a lot of inquiries in that area. Hiring remotely, going back to the very beginning of the HR process, you have to rebalance your methods of evaluating job candidates. If you're sitting in Portugal and you're opening a location, a branch or subsidiary in the United States, for example, how do I staff it? How do I hire? How do I get that face-to-face close contact so that I can sufficiently read more than just the resumes and the letters of recommendations, but I can read their body language, for example, and know what kind of person I'm considering to hire. Will they fit into our organization? So I think you have to use video interviews in this time, but I think you need greater diligence than you may have had in the past when you've actually had opportunities to meet job candidates face to face. You probably need to consult others in the industry. You know this person? Have they been successful? Do you feel like they're reliable and that they would be the right fit for your for your business. And then what if it doesn't turn out after you've hired somebody? It's very difficult legally in many countries to terminate that employment, or to discipline an employee who's not working out, or to provide them the coaching, as Christina would put it, to allow them to succeed in that job. You know, if you're going to take an extreme measure, if somebody just doesn't work out, it's awkward enough in normal circumstances to deal with termination of an employment relationship. Very awkward. That's just inherent in HR counseling. So, but during these times especially, you need to display extra sensitivity towards those employees. Sure, in our system of 50 federal states in the United States, it's very easy to terminate employment. That may not be what others are accustomed to in their countries. And this sort of goes over into another subject area, but it's often very different how things like a termination of employment are dealt with in one legal culture versus another legal culture. So maybe if you, for example, terminate at will, as you may in Georgia, for any reason or for no reason whatsoever, you might expect, well, that's the end of the story. I'm sitting here in Lisbon, that person didn't work out. I think I need to look elsewhere. I need to let them go. Sure, you can terminate their employment if they don't have a contract that provides otherwise. It's at will, but it's not necessarily the end of story. You then start to maybe receive notices from the Georgia Department of Labor that person has applied for unemployment compensation. What do you do with that? I thought I was finished with this issue. Those are the kinds of things that arise that are treated differently from country to country. You need to be sensitive to that. So it's those cultures. Maybe you want to staff your operation with a local person from Portugal to oversee those first few months, or maybe to remain there permanently, because they would maintain, maybe in your view, a better link or clearer link to the mother country company back in Portugal. So then you have to consider, well, do I need a special type of visa for that employee to remain in the United States for some period of time? This is going to vary from country to country. I can tell you right now, it's not a very good climate in many respects for transferring an employee from one country to the United States. The visa situation has become much more difficult here. We have experts in any law firm pretty much that does with international business that deals exclusively with answering those visa questions. What's the right type of visa? Are there restrictions that make it impossible to send one of our local employees over to the United States? So you have to be very patient in that whole process.
Thank you, John. We have approximately 1 minute left for these interventions, and my last question, and you can both answer to it very briefly, will be, are there significant differences between countries with regards to these matters, to business culture, to the way people look at working environments?
I'll just start that very briefly, and then I want to hear what Christina can add to that conversation. But I think I touched on it in this employment realm about how things are done differently across legal cultures. If you're in Europe or Latin America or Asia, for example, you're going to have a code system of laws that are very clear, very specific about how you deal with certain situations and what are the rights of the employees. Not so in countries like the United States, Great Britain, New Zealand, Australia, those that have what we call a common law system. So if you're dealing with a company that's located in Europe, for example, there's a greater expectation that the employees are going to receive a pretty high level of protection, and that's just not the case in the United States. Christina, can you add to that?
Well, not on the legal side, but on the business cultural side, yes, there are there are differences. And even I was so reading something about your one of your students, John, at the Georgia Tech, the Scheller College of Business, and she was saying that the class she most enjoyed was the cross-cultural management, because she really saw the influence that culture and customs have in doing businesses and how business is conducted. I have many stories in my book, again, I mean, real stories of German, you know, people from so many other countries that coming to the US, and recommendations of, and a lot of misconceptions as well. We tend to have these misconceptions, that things that we hear. So for example, coming to the US, everyone, when we're out of the US, we think, most of us, that, oh my God, that is Hollywood, right? So we are going to be successful immediately as soon as we get there. It's going to be awesome. There's so many opportunities, the American dream. And I would say yes to a lot of that, but also it is not exactly that. You need to take, you know, those steps that I mentioned before, those principles, because it's not coming here and becoming a billionaire overnight. That's not going to happen. So what we see on the Hollywood movies really do influence the way we see the U.S., but of course the way we see other countries. So sometimes our building these stereotypes does not benefit us. So if we're going to another country, we need to do a little bit of research there and be open, and especially know ourselves.
Well, you have to expect that things are not necessarily done the same way elsewhere as they're done here. That's just where you go in with that expectation.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, maintaining that open mind about the fact that there are differences is extremely important. And I think once you accepted that fact and are willing to work in that culture, then whether it's the legal culture or other aspects of culture, management styles, then you're going to go much farther.
Management style, super important. Leadership style, super important. The way you communicate is different in different parts of the world. So you got to be very aware of that.
Thank you. And well, today's highlights were the importance of purpose, and why are you moving to another country or to another business area or to another personal challenge. Bear this in mind, and seek for professional advice if you need to rethink your whole life or your new strategy. And make sure to get financial support and other resources before making that move. Don't forget to invest in marketing, trade shows, making new contacts. As a marketing professional, I can never stress enough the importance of keep contacting people in a professional way. Use your CRM tools in order to improve effectiveness of communication, especially in these new times. Train your ability to wait and have a medium plan and monitor to take action. Get ready to grow. Don't believe you're going to be stuck in the same ground forever, because fortunately it will improve, and you better be prepared for that. Otherwise you will lose a lot. And when you meet people from other cultures, be curious, be respectful, and cultivate trust and relationships wisely. Don't forget the importance of networks, and take into consideration the differences in human resources between legal systems. Those were the main topics we've discussed today. And now, if you don't mind, I'd like to get you on some of the audience's questions. And our first question today, Kathy.
Surprise, I have a question.
Okay, just to mention, Kathy Ellis comment.
Or Kathy can go first.
Respect varies from culture to culture. More of a comment. Oh, thank you, Kathy. Perhaps you can explain it a bit further after Justin poses his question. We'd love to hear from you too. Please, Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I thought it was a really interesting point about the reading of the body language during the hiring process, and also how it relates, hiring, how it relates to different cultures and termination. Would you anticipate that maybe if this continues and more hiring is done remotely without meeting in person, would that lead to a change in some of the culture or even some of the law as far as termination? Because now you as an employer possibly could say, well, I'm not as culpable in hiring somebody who didn't fit the criteria and who didn't work out because we were never even able to meet in person. Would that be something you could anticipate maybe happening?
I think it would be probably more of a consideration in the future when someone's forced to evaluate whether you made the right decision in terminating someone's employment. I think that would just be a factor that might be considered, but I can't see the law as changing. I think we're forced to substitute other technologies for that face-to-face interview process.
I can add something to that, Justin. That's a really good question, actually. But also asking people, when I did all those interviews, I wanted to ask those CEOs, how do you hire in a different culture? So because sometimes there are people that really can promote themselves and sell themselves really well and have really good resumes, but then when they come to the practical side of it, they're not delivering as we need them to. And so maybe asking even questions and tell me situations in this coronavirus times. What did you do? What did you improve? Tell me about your day. How did you deal with the fear? All those things can help you get a little bit more, dig deeper into who the person is and if they have what it takes.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Do we have more questions? Perhaps Christine and John could comment on Kathy Ellie's comment. Respect varies from culture to culture. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I think Christine is more of an expert than I am on that question, but no, it's true. I've experienced myself the respect how it varies in working in my own legal profession. When I'm engaged in negotiations in the Middle East, for example, there are very different signals that you can send that are regarded as disrespectful there that may be acceptable here. And the same is true in reverse. We may regard certain body language or acts as being bad manners, but they're not in another culture. And it's all part of, it goes back, well, have you really tried to learn something about the culture so you can show an appropriate level of respect for those people with whom you're working? And if you haven't done that, if you haven't made that effort, then you're not going to be very successful.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, I could also add in leadership, for example, when you're working in a company that has a global footprint and you are leading, you are from, let's say, South America or, Latin America, or even Europe. You have, it's different hierarchy than if you're from the US, Australia, even the UK. So, that leadership style can be, and you think people are being disrespectful because they're not treating you as the way you believe you should be treated, or they're not highlighting things that are important to you. And yes, there has to be an openness to, okay, this is not a personal thing. There's not disrespecting me. This is probably a cultural thing. So to bring that into the equation can really create that compassion that we need to have for each other. Not only in a moment like this, but dealing internationally. I mean, you can't be strict to your ideas and think that you're right. Who's right? Reality for me is one, for you is something else. and we have to get together and find the common ground. So yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you. We have 5 minutes more, and we have a question from Marco. She is asking, how are recent US moves to restrict immigration going to affect the workplace? Perhaps we can start with John.
I believe that as it gets more difficult to send foreign nationals to the United States to continue their employment with a company that's expanding internationally, as that becomes more difficult, we'll need to rely more on the local talent. And we've already talked to some extent about the difficulties in hiring locally, especially across cultures. And I think that'll become much more difficult. We are going to see fewer immigrants filling those highly qualified positions in the United States.
Well, I'd like to say something about that too, not on the legal side, but if it is important to, if you're expanding somewhere, it is important, and from all the research I've done and all with, you know, even the book has a lot of that information in my book. It is important to have someone from the culture, from the original culture of that company in another place of the world. Because they can integrate both. So they will integrate what they are learning in that space of the world and integrate the culture of the company, the parent company. So to blend that together is really important. Otherwise it can jeopardize the business. So I don't know how this is going to really play in this new legal situation, or so we'll see. But
yeah, it's a we'll see, because it is going to be more difficult to have that person there locally, in, let's say, in the United States, to integrate the business processes. It is going to be more difficult.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. There were other questions, but perhaps you can answer them by email, so we have time to conclude, since we have less than 3 minutes now. And I'd like to conclude the third and final session of this webinar. Be assured that we won't be cutting contact with you very soon. You all receive a short summary of our speakers' interventions during these sessions via email, as well as all the questions we were able to answer here. And video footage of this webinar will also be made available soon. As always, thank you a lot for being with us here today. Please join me in thanking our speakers, Christina and John. I hope you found this series of webinars useful for you and your business. And I hope we can meet again soon. All the best to you.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks so much.